Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this opportunity to speak to you. Before I start issue, I just want to back up what Dr. Rob and Wade have been talking about in relation to the World Health Organization. As they so eloquently explained, it is attached to no country. There's no country that has passed legislation for it. It is just an it out there. And we need to take it and cut it down. So both Dr. Rob and Wade were telling you what's actually coming down the pipe. Sadly, I have to tell you that while I was in the Senate, 1999 to 2005, John Howard, a Liberal Prime Minister, put an Act of Parliament through the House of Reps and through the Senate. Its basic purpose was so that judges of the Australian courts would be eligible to sit on the World Court in Den Haag. What he didn't tell all of you was in that same act, he purports to have the power to make international law take precedent over Australian law. So back in 2003, John Howard officially locked all of our laws to be under international law. I was one senator out of 76 who objected to that. I could not even get a second senator to second my objection, which would have caused a division in the Senate at least, and you would have known the people who voted to make international law to take precedent over our Australian law. The other thing that the Act also purported to do was allow a sheriff from the World Court to enter Australia without documentation and to also arrest anybody, you or I, and extradite us out of Australia without the ability to even have the matter addressed in an Australian court. The significance of that is in Australia, and I say theoretically, we are innocent until the government or the laws prove us guilty. When you actually get to Europe, you are guilty until you prove your innocence. So imagine being hauled all the way to Den Haag, and then you have to prove your innocence. So that's what both Wade and Dr. Rob are telling you, right? When this World Health dictum over our health comes in, it won't stop with health. It will also have influence over climate change and therefore everything that we do. So I just wanted to really emphasise that significance which John Howard actually created in 2003. I first became aware of what was happening to our title documents late 2019. A friend of mine had a lovely parchment deed, handed it into the Department of Lands and asked for his property to be divided into two, which that was all carried out. And naturally he asked at the end of the process, well, can I have my titles back? And that was when he was told, no, they don't exist anymore. Now, it took me quite a long time to actually even get that in my head. Under the Westminster system, we have had 800 years of very sound land ownership. In 2013, when all of the premiers of every state in Australia agreed to adopt an act from New South Wales, Barry O'Farrell copied a Canadian act, passed it through the New South Wales Parliament to facilitate electronic lodgement in land transfers. What they didn't tell you was at the end of that process, they were going to cancel all of our titles. So that was introduced into an entity called COAG. How many people have heard of COAG? Okay, all right. No, that's good. For those who are not familiar with COAG, it is another one of these ITs that just sit out there. It's the Coalition of Australian Governments. It's only the premiers and the federal government that are involved. So Barry O'Farrell took his New South Wales Act to COAG in 2012, I apologise. By 2013, all of the states had said, yes, this is a great idea. And Victoria was the first state to implement it fully. So your Victorian government cancelled all of your title deeds in 2016. Did they tell any of you? No. South Australia cancelled all of their title, I say deeds, well it's documents in the legislation. So South Australia cancelled theirs in 2017. Queensland cancelled ours in 2019. New South Wales cancelled all title documents in 2021, and Western Australia just cancelled all of those last year in 23. So the significance of that obviously is they had concerns that if they cancelled all title documents in Australia just in one hit, then there would have been a massive uprising over it. So they staged it all the way around. So, just to back that up, and I apologise, can I have a couple of helpers, please? give everyone one. Come on, surely one of the...
Yeah, I'll do it.
Thank you.
We're just handing them out.
Yeah, okay.
And would somebody save me one? Yes, so this is the process that was actually followed in cancelling. Yes. Ooh, do I need a peg? I meant to ask you for a cover earlier on. Yes, so once all of the states had agreed to actually implement the New South Wales Act, and there is an interesting sort of side to that. So the Victoria has actually entered the national law into your parliament, right? And so obviously so has every other state right around. The problem with adopting, so your parliament, right, adopted a New South Wales Act which they cannot alter. Now, how ridiculous is that? So actually every land transaction that has occurred in Victoria since 2016 has been done on a New South Wales Act. Do you think that might be a little illegal? Just kind of. Once they, all of the states had actually agreed to do that, then COAG, as it was then created another entity. So you imagine you're the parliaments all around Australia, and the premiers, they get together on a dirty weekend out here, right, not consulting you, the parliament, at all. What they have done has created a situation where they run your state through companies. If not companies, what they call NGOs, non-government entities. So the first thing that they created was ARNEC. So that's the Australian Registrars National Electronic Conveyancing Council. Each state, or these corporate entities, have appointed a registrar in your state. But he is not a public servant. He is an employee of a corporate entity. And anyone, how many people here have tried through a freedom of information, get some information from a government department? Not many? Yeah. Okay. Freedom of information process does not apply to corporate entities. If you want to get a copy of what is held in the registrar and it is just a piece of binary code, don't think that somewhere out there is a legal document with your name and your property on it. There is not. The registrars are in control of that database, and they also have, under the actual legislation the electronic conveyancing national law, they have the ability to alter that register based on ensuring its integrity. So if there is an argument over a piece of property, you don't go to court. The register just decides who is right and who is wrong. And you have no redress. The next thing that COAG did, they actually created the electronic electronic lodgement network. Now, that underpins the actual data that is held by two entities who I'll talk about afterwards. The Commonwealth Bank, Morgan and Stanley, and another entity which escapes my mind at the moment, they put up $600 million to actually create what is called the binary code that underpins all of the transactions. So just think about that. This hasn't come out of a government department where they have people who do that. This is purely corporatisation. So having put out $600 million, do you think they did that as just a goodwill gesture to everybody in Australia? Bullshit. They are in there and they will, what is called, monetize the asset. They paid the money, they have the asset. That is the binary code under which all land transactions are carried out. The best example I can give you of monetarising an asset is Bill Gates. Go back 30 years, right, when we're all just starting to use computers. We'd go into a retailer, purchase a computer, and if it was not an Apple, it was an Android, we would then buy a program from Microsoft, take it home, put it on the computer, and you owned the program. Anyone bought a computer in the last 5 years? Somebody must have. There. Well, you're the same as me. You're now paying $14.99 a month. Microsoft, for obvious tax reasons, only purports to be all around the world. There is 1.5 million people using a Microsoft program. But think of that. I think it's a lot more than that. So each month, the Microsoft Corporation receives 15 times 1.5 million.
Billion.
Yeah, oh, it's in the billions. A month. So, Combank, Morgan and Stanley, and whoever their third party is, you're not going to kid me that they're not going to monetarise the fact that they're holding your bit of binary code on their computers. Welcome to the real world. That's where it's going. I've been fighting now for 3 full days, having bought a new printer. They want $10 a month for the drives. that should be on the computer, but they're not. So, that's monetizing the asset. So we move on now to the electronic lodgement network operators. So it is the actual ARNEC, the people who actually fill the positions in ARNEC. They actually assess the applications to be an electronic lodgement operator, and they give licences from each of the registrars, give licences in their individual state. So there are only currently 2 operating entities that are ELNOs. One is PEXA. Now, PEXA, their parent is a company called Link. Anyone heard about Link? Well, a lot of us know quite a bit about BlackRock, okay? BlackRock hold major shares in Link, and Link hold major shares in BlackRock. So think that mega corporations. Link also, incidentally, is the government Australia in every state. So the entity that used to be a statutory body, right, the government printer, no longer exists. It's Link Corporation, who actually prints all legislation that's passed here in Victoria and in every other state. Again, we've got what should be a statutory body has actually been, the parliaments have just done that 90-degree turn, corporate entities, and we're going to govern through them. So our illustrious Mr. Turnbull, he decided that he was going to morph COAG into another entity called the National Cabinet. Have you heard the references to that? Right. His reason for doing that was he then tried to apply the 30-year embargo on what COAG had done, namely all of this. That went up to the High Court, it was challenged, and in a unanimous decision, the High Court of Australia ruled that the National Cabinet was not a statutory body and therefore not eligible to the 30-year embargo. If we go over the page, so we're looking at the individual states and territories in 2013 proceeded to adopt the Electronic Conveyancing National Law, knowing full well if they didn't, they shouldn't be the Premier of any state, that they could not alter that at all. Now, I have here with me a couple of copies of the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution. And in the front of it, there is an English Act. So can I just sort of finish on the rest of the, doom and gloom, right? Now we move to the remedy to correct what all of the premiers of their own abolition, right, who actually cancelled all your titles. We're now moving to the remedy of that. And in our Australian Constitution, and I'll open this up here later on if anyone wants to look, our Constitution is unusual in that the first 9 sections of the Commonwealth Constitution is actually the empowering British Act. It's only nine sections. So the House of Commons actually passed an act empowering Queen Victoria to proclaim the Commonwealth of Australia. I think a lot of us are old enough to remember Sumner Miller, his saying. And why is this so? Right, we need to go right back in time. We need to go back to the late 1100s. This was when King Richard was forming an army to go to the Holy Land to actually get Christians in control again of the Holy Land. The barons, that is the land barons in England in the late 1100s, all had standing armies. Generally speaking, they were generally busy sort of pinching a bit of land off the next door baron, and they do that by having a little war, and the winner claimed the portion of the other baron's lands. So when King Richard was forming his army to go to the Holy Land, he requested of the land barons part of their standing armies. And for having provided his soldiers, and that means not only transferring them over to the control of King Richard, they also had to provide the food, the armaments and the clothing for them as well. So King Richard, in proportion to the number of soldiers that a baron provided him, gave that baron a portion of Crown land. Off he went to the Holy Lands, was successful, returned it, actually ended up being run for 200 years by the Knights Templars. On his way back from the Holy Land, he decided to have a little yacht holiday and ended up getting himself captured for 10 years. And the English people had to pay tribute for 10 years. He was eventually released, and coming back through Normandy was raiding, some of them were Saxons, some of them were French castles, just to pick up a little bit of loose change, so he'd have something Friday night in the pub. Unfortunately, he was shot through the eye, so he had the helmet and everything, an arrow through the eye. King Richard was dead. So his younger brother, King John, and this is the King John of Sherwood Forest, Robin Hood, not a fable, a factual. King John was actually at war with the French across the Channel, and he was taxing the English people unmercifully, and then he started to revoke the land grants that King Richard had paid to the barons. So I see a similarity between what King John was doing between approximately 1203 through to 1500, right? I see what our Australian government is doing to us. Okay, admittedly John only took it off the barons, or that's all we know. But our government is actually taking our property rights of us, not in little bits and pieces, they are just destroying them. So we're no different to the barons. They got their act together, they waged a civil law for 13 years and captured King John. Now, back then, there's no Buckingham Palace, there's no, what's the other one? Anyhow, none of those existed. King John actually lived in the Tower of London. So the barons actually captured the Tower of London. They had John by his short and curlies and said, sign this or we'll take your head off. Interestingly, within 2 years he was revoking having signed it. But the good part about the Magna Carta that we have never been told at school or educated, in actuality, in section 61 of the Magna Carta affords 25 barons right of revoke on any king or queen's dictates. And that, in 61, it sets out very, very clearly as one of those 25 dies, the process is to replace them. So those 25 barons have right of veto over anything that King Charles III wants to do, or can actually implement anything that the Parliament has passed that he revokes. So that's where what we're doing as the remedy really kicks in. I've been in touch with the Petitions office in the House of Commons. I've spoken to them at length twice. And they've advised me that a petition containing 40,000 signatures has to be recognised and read in the House of Commons. A petition with 100,000 signatures in it has to be debated on the floor of the House of Commons. So for it to be debated, there has to be a bill entered into the House of Commons. So Rod Cullerton and myself have set out on travelling Australia until we get more than 100,000 signatures. And this is where you can help yourself to get your title deeds back, because that's the entire focus of the actual petition. I've got plenty of copies of it here, and I'll just read you what is known as the prayer. So, the prayer of the acknowledged, the assigned below, do request His Majesty's ministers prepare the instrument empowering His Majesty King Charles III, by the grace of God, King of the realm and of his other realms and territories, head of the Commonwealth, defender on the faith. 2, declare the office of the Governor-General of the Commonwealth of Australia vacant and appoint a representative to that purpose. That means that the Governor-General will again become subject to the Australian Constitution, which he isn't today. Secondly, declare the office of governors of the several states of the Commonwealth of Australia vacant and appoint representatives to those purposes. And declare that the position of the Chief Justice of all Chapter 3 courts of the Commonwealth of Australia be declared vacant and instruct the Governor-General to appoint justices to those purposes, and declare any person who swore or affirmed allegiance to the Queen of Australia be ineligible for public office, and declare any person who so swore or affirmed allegiance to the Queen of Australia unable to sit as a member of the House of Representatives or the Senate of the Commonwealth of Australia due to being in contravention of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, Section 41, having sworn allegiance to a foreign power. And number 6 is God save the King. So some people have raised the issue, what if if King Charles decides not to act on the actual petition and the documents being created, which I think they will, and I'll explain that again in a moment. Then the Privy Council, which is made up of the Lord's spiritual and the Lord's temporal, again the barons, right, have already indicated prior to 2019 that if the sovereign won't actually implement what we're asking in the petition, the Privy Council will actually authorise it. So when I say we, I'm talking about myself, Rod Cullerton, who hasn't been real well, and each one of you. It's up to us to get this 100,000 signatures, and I have forms and everything here. I'll just explain also the reason why we are actually assured, or confident would be a better word, confident that the House of Commons will act on our behalf. As I said earlier on, the first 9 sections of the Constitution of Australia is the Empowering Act passed by the House of Commons, empowering Queen Victoria to proclaim the Commonwealth. And in those 9 sections, we're focusing on Section 2. The provision of this Act referring to the Queen shall extend to Her Majesty, so that's Queen Victoria, her heirs and successors in the sovereignty of the United Kingdom. So that's Section 2 of the Empowering Act. When Bob Hawke in '86 brought in the Australia Act without a referendum yes, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth did sign an empowering act for the Australian government, or the Australia Act, but in section 15 of that Act, Queen Elizabeth II required, in implementing the Australia Act in Australia, it had to comply with section 128 again of the Constitution. Just go back to the Magna Carta. What really happened in that document that King John was made to sign was it stripped the sovereign of absolute sovereignty. The only power that the sovereign has today, and that's King Charles as well, is to either reserve a bill that is actually produced through the English Parliament, right, or give it royal assent. What the barons did, and I was interested at first when I started to research this, why didn't the barons actually place the power that they had taken away from King John? Why didn't they formally establish that in the House of Lords? Well, the reason is that there's two. One, they were part of it, so there would be no separation. The other thing was that at that time, and even today, a substantial number of the members of the House of Lords are life peerage. So they actually travel there, so father to son or daughter, right? So they are not elected. They were absolutely correct in transferring that power to the House of Commons, because the House of Commons is elected by the people of England. So back to the Empowering Act. So that it says very, very clearly that it is tied to the sovereignty of the United Kingdom. Now, the sovereignty of the United Kingdom is actually what they call a tri-crown. It is the English crown, the crown of Northern Ireland, and the crown of Scotland. They make up the sovereignty of the United Kingdom. So, did Bob Hawke check with him if it was all right? No, he didn't. The other section is section 5 of the same Act. The Act and all laws made by the Parliament of the Commonwealth under the Constitution shall be binding on the courts, judges, and the people of every state and of every part of the Commonwealth. So when I'm having an old timers, when Whitlam removed the word Commonwealth out of all legislation just prior to 1973, he actually offended section 5 of the actual Empowering Act. So in the petition, we're not requesting the House of Commons to actually alter the Australian Constitution, this document, right? We are asking them to enforce compliance with their Act. So how embarrassing would it be if the House of Commons was to turn around and say, oh no, that's all right. they cannot, once they have been placed on notice, allow what is happening in Australia to continue. Now, I know that's very technical. I hope as many of you have been recording it so you can sit down and go through it again. We are having it videoed, and that will be made available to anybody here who requests it. I also have just a single A4, a covering, I call it a covering note, to set out why we're following this process. So what we're asking is that the entire Commonwealth Government of Australia be brought back to complying with the Constitution. I do need your help. I have been doing this now since about June of last year, and yes, I've got just over 5,000. Rod has an unknown number over there, but we're a bloody long way from 100,000. So I've attached a cover sheet to 5 petition or signature forms. For a petition to be effected correctly, the person signing the petition must be able to read the prayer. So on the top of every one of the signature forms is the prayer. That's what we're requesting the House of Commons to effect. And if anyone takes one of those, I don't know, how many people have got a black book? No? Good. My book is yellow. So I've got a yellow book. So if you take one of the little packs, would you please put just your contact, your name and your contact, so that we can stay in touch. All of the filled forms, I'll ask you to post to my post box 2400 at Mariba, and those details are on the bottom of the cover letter as well.
Oranges and sunshine. All I need is oranges and sunshine. All I need is oranges and sunshine. All I need is oranges and sunshine.